Hello Titans, today we're going to be learning about shape patterns. One with like shapes that have no fill and shapes that have fill in the background. The shape has no fill. You can see that a pattern again is a replicated element or a repeated element throughout the page. So I've opened up this example that I've already shown you of a pattern because this one is specific to what we're doing. We're creating pattern repeats. And what that means is that ultimately we want our patterns to fill shapes. We need, as I've been telling you, all of our shapes to line up. So this blue triangle or diamond half is going to be connected to this one when I'm going to alt click it now so you can see what I mean. I'm going to alt move this over here, and you can see that when I put the two sides together it creates a replicating pattern. So if I click off of it you can't even see the seam. That is the entire goal of our project. So if I were to repeat this several times using the one pattern that I've created, I can put them up next to each other, and with any luck, you won't even be able to notice where one ends and where one begins. So that's legitimately what we're going to fill our shapes in our drawing with. Why it's important that this triangle is the same as this triangle, and why we're lining these things up using a grid. Why not just throw them into space and hope for the best? This is why. So here we have my line patterns. I deleted the last one. I just didn't like it that much. I'm going to make a new one later. You can see that I grouped each one and I moved them down into the other spaces so that I would have room to work on my new pattern. And you can see that I started one already too. So I'm going to show you the way I started one. There's a couple things that we could do. Obviously we want our grid set up, so if you didn't already watch that video, you should. And make sure that you group and lock your grid so that it doesn't move while you're using it. Alright, so I'm going to go to my shape tool because I'm going to use shapes for this one. And there's a couple things I could do here. I could use my polygon or star tool and I can make them special by double clicking and telling it how many sides or points, if I'm using the star tool, that I want. So if you're using your polygon or your star tool, I recommend that you make them original by not leaving them default. The polygon tool's default has 6 sides, the star tool has 5 points. So if I were using my polygon, I would double click. I would tell it to have more than 6 points or less than 6 points because that's best case scenario. So I'm just going to go with like a 9-sided object. It's very kind of strange. Press OK, and then there's the first shape that I'm going to work with. Now another thing that I recommend so that you don't have the same thing as everybody else is using your alt techniques to work on making your shape duplicated and possibly making a group of them, because again that's going to make it, other people are probably not going to think about that. So that looks nice and even. Once I'm going to use my arrow keys now just to touch them in there a tiny bit more, and once I have my group created, I'm going to Command G it and I'm going to shrink it down to a size that'll fit on my grid. Now this is grouped, so I could color it also. I probably should have done that before I grouped it if I was going to do it. I'm going to zoom in so you can see what I'm talking about here, because placement is really, really important when you're making these patterns. Use my selection tool to grab this over here. So each of these shapes that I made obviously have anchor points on them. And if you use your white arrow tool and click off of it and select one of your anchor points, you know that you can move it, but we don't want to do that. What I want to do is tell it that I'm going to be moving it. I'm going to select the whole object by dragging a box over it and grab it by one specific point. When I do that, it should lock to my grid point. You can see that it just locked in there. To create the pattern by placing the anchor points on intersections of the grid. Alright, so now I'm going to alt click this. I'm going to move it to the side. I'm going to grab it by the same specific anchor point that I chose and find another place where it locks in. I'm going to make one more duplicate. So the reason that this is now a big problem is because anything that comes off this side of the grid has to match exactly on this side of the grid. If you look over on this grid that I've already made, or this pattern that I've already made, it has 3 also, but they're small enough that they can be spaced out that they fit. So I could skip a line between each one. Here, if I skip a line between each one, it ends up not being enough space. I could either make them smaller, and whenever I do that, by the way, I'm going to delete all my other duplicates and just reduplicate them because I want to know that they're the exact same size. I don't want to eyeball it and guess. Alright, so I see that anchor point is literally on that grid marker. So now I can do the same thing, alt click. and it pretty much clicked in the space on that one. Good. And this time it doesn't go off my grid. Anyway, so now that I have this set up, I can just select this whole lineup of them and I could move that into space. So I'm moving it to so that all the same anchor points as in this one up here for this line is in the exact same position where it's just underneath that line, just touching the point there. And you can see how this shape pattern is going to turn up. Now I can select each of these and start coloring them in. Now with the white arrow tool, I'm able to select just one shape despite the fact that they're grouped. So if I want to, I could change things now because the pattern is already made with the shape. So if I want, I could start making things different colors and stuff, but I don't want to go crazy and make it the whole rainbow because then it's just not gonna, it's gonna look more like a mess at the end. So I'm still gonna repeat a pattern here too. I'm going to repeat it with color. So it's light blue, dark blue, light blue, dark blue, etc. And I could do that through the whole way. So a finished version of this pattern would look like, let me climb over here again, like this. And I even changed the color like so it wraps around. So that, for example, this one is green here, and I turn them so that, you know, the green one is now on the bottom. That's one way to make your pattern. Another thing might be that like maybe you want to alternate shapes, so I would do this then. I would say that now in my next, you know, area I'm going to do a star. Since I made my other shapes so original, so I might use a star and then I could bring it in. So I'm going to grab this anchor point right there and see if I can make it lock. So I'm using the anchor point that's on the left arm of the star and making sure that it hits that exact point. I'm grabbing this one again because I noticed that it wasn't on the intersection exactly. So there you go. So these match now. So again, anything that goes off here has to come on here. Otherwise, it won't be even. So I'm just doing the easier thing, which is making sure that nothing goes off anywhere. Okay, so if I use any of the first four tools, you'll see that when you make it, it automatically has, and I can hold shift, by the way, to make things, even if I want to make like a square exactly, versus if I let go of shift, I can make a rectangle. But it keeps an anchor point in the middle so that when you move it, you could make it click to those intersections. All right, so that's important to know, and it's also just like our Mickey Mouse can do the same thing because it's composed of those types of shapes. So I can use the central anchor point. If you make a shape like, for example, our star, it doesn't have a central anchor point, in which case you obviously have to use one of the other anchor points to put it on whatever intersection you're going to do. By the way, it would have been smarter of me to not make these diagonal lines. I talked to you in the former the line video about how to make lines and how we should make them horizontal or vertical, because this kind of messed up my pattern. If I had made these all red and these all yellow and these all red and these all yellow and so on, the pattern would have actually kept correctly. But when this repeats, it repeats next to the next one, which is going to be yellow too, but then because there was a yellow one here, so that makes the pattern create two yellow ones in a row, which changes it from an alternating pattern to like one and then two yellow and then one yellow. It's kind of like it wasn't thought out as well as I thought it was when I was doing it, but you can learn from my mistake. So you do have to have the same thing falling off here as what's coming on here, but I would work horizontally and vertically. Now I'm going to go over to my pen tool and I'm going to create a brand new shape. Alright, so using my pen tool and maybe my white arrow tool, I can make a shape that looks pretty good, and I'm just making some changes to it now to make it look what I consider cool. And now I can make this shape smaller, and you'll see that there is no, I'm holding shift because I want to stay in proportion. There's no central anchor point. So again, this is one of those times where we're going to have to use one of the other existing anchor points to make sure it's in the right spot. Spacing is important. So being that there's going to be a space here, it makes sense that there should be a space after my shape too. So I'm going to do that the exact same way. I'm going to skip one line each time. But now this is my pattern. So once I have my three patterns complete with or without backgrounds. I just put the background colors on there because I wanted to. But as in the line pattern, it'll give you more options at the end to not have a background color. But that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please feel free to leave appropriate feedback.